I'm on. Good morning, good morning. Sorry for the delay. I do have a quorum. I've got Mr. Weezar with me. Welcome everybody to the meeting and Happy New Year. Why don't we start off, Mr. Clerk, with what we've got on the agenda. Let's go through some of the easier issues.
Would you like to start with item 1, sir?
Well, why don't you read it? I think maybe what we can do is we can handle 2, 3, and 4 and just move those.
Okay. I'll go ahead and read those items into the record. Item number 2 is Resolution Buscaino Englander and CLA Report relative to including in the city's 2017-18 state legislative program support for and/or sponsorship of legislation amending California Penal Code Section 830.7 to enhance arrest authority for street services investigators and add vehicles used by these investigators to the list of authorized emergency vehicles as defined in California Vehicle Code Section 2416. And item number 3 is Chief Legislative Analyst Report and Resolution relative to including in the 2017-18 state legislative program support or sponsorship of legislation or administrative action to establish a state census 2020 program and include funding in the 2017-18 state budget for local and state programs that provide technical support, outreach, and education for Census 2020.
Okay, so if there are no questions on items 2, 3, and 4, then without objection.
I'm sorry, and item number 4 is City Clerk Report relative to fees for election recounts.
Okay, so then without objection, these items will be deemed approved. I'm now joined by Marquise Harris-Dawson. So we have our full panel here today. Could you please read the remaining item?
Item number 1 is a Chief Legislative Analyst Report in response to motion Wesson Buscaino Price relative to options for a May 2017 ballot measure to amend the city charter relative to the composition of the Los Angeles Police Department's Board of Rights panels.
Okay, so I have 2 public comment cards. Why don't I take them? So let me get Mr. Shapiro come forward, followed by Mr. White. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you very briefly. My name is David Shapiro. I've been privileged to serve as one of your hearing examiners for the Police Commission for 31 years and as a civilian member of Boards of Rights for 25 years. And the comment I wanted to make is that while I don't come to the committee today in opposition to the proposal, as a civilian, I favor active civilian and extensive civilian involvement, of course, in this process, as in all government processes. I do want to stand up for the integrity of the Board of Rights as it is currently constituted for this reason. I've been in many, many boards over those 25 years, and in my judgment, in my experience, the command officers who have been involved in those boards have made, in my opinion, as best I can tell, I cannot read the minds of others, but I think that the decisions that have been made have been independent decisions. I think they have been reasonably based, even in cases in which I have disagreed with such command officers, on the information.
Keep going.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief. I think that notwithstanding some comment which I know has been made, as a general proposition, the command officers have acted with integrity, and having been privileged for this number of years to participate in the system myself, I wanted to stand up and make that assertion before the committee as it considers this, and offer finally, if I may, the not very innovative sounding proposal that the committee perhaps consider a 2-in-1 constitution of boards as perhaps an additional option. And I say this as I conclude, because while I very much favor the idea of having more than one civilian on given boards or the existence of that option, I think that I have benefited, I know that I have as a civilian member in boards and in deliberation from the provision of institutional knowledge and technical knowledge about the science and art of conducting police work. Thank you very much, Mr. President and members.
Thank you. Mr. White, please come forward. And don't rush yourself either. You'll be given.
Well, I appreciate that this morning. So my name is Pete White with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. Any conversation on police reform, be it use of force, accountability, transparency, or discipline, must be centered by the voice, power, and opinion of those that find themselves continuously on the wrong side of the badge and bullets. The mere fact that this entire process was cooked up and written behind closed doors in partnership with the Los Angeles Police Protective League, out of the eyesight and earshot of organizations and individuals that have spent a lifetime on this issue, speaks to the continued pattern of pay-to-play politics that define Los Angeles. To be clear, of the options listed, one could be considered given the wealth of information provided by the Chief Legislative Analyst report. Number 5, to scrap this entire process, which is unique to Los Angeles, and to start all over again. But there is one step before that, and that step is to start the process of replacing Chief Beck, because as this report shows, there is a vote of no confidence in his leadership within the walls of the institution he commands. What else could explain that less than half of those the chief of police recommends for termination are actually terminated? And that in cases of demotion or suspension, the chief's training, experience, and leadership is soundly rebuked. The only answer is that his leadership is non-effective, a fact that the general public agrees with and should be terminated. Now let's pivot to your leadership and political motivation. Given the power of the peace officers' lobby, and it could be considered at this time political suicide to go against their wishes. It would be, however, politically advantageous to join the public clamor for increased civilian oversight and use that energy to pass a ballot measure written by the League that would actually protect and shield officers from discipline more often than not. It is no secret, and I'm closing, it is no secret that the racist Willie Horton ads had a lasting effect on political campaigns and careers and ultimately impact the way public safety decisions are routinely made by police unions and leagues. The fact that your proposed measure would sunset in 3 years, which, by the way, happens to be the same amount of time Chief Beck has on his existing contract, roundly illustrates where your leadership begins and ends. Removing a chief, the right thing to do, is not an option. Instead, hand his power over to the union and let him ride off into the sunset on the taxpayer's dime. And you could never be called soft on crime. Do something different. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So again, I want to thank Mr. Shapiro and Mr. White for coming down. I think you both kind of, kind of dot the I and cross the T where it relates to the importance of this conversation, and that, it's a conversation that we feel the time has come to have. So I'm going to ask the department folk to come up, give their report, and then we will take it from there. I have a series of questions. So please come forward, identify yourself.
Good morning, committee members. Joshua Drake from the CLA's office.
Matthias Farfan with the CLA's office.
Go ahead.
Before you use a report, aligning a series of options that the council may consider on changing the Constitution of the Board of Rights. When we were working on this report, we took into account the history of the board, how it compares to other jurisdictions, and outcomes of board decisions. So we present various different options to increase civilian oversight of the Board of Rights panels. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Okay. Does anybody else want to make an opening, or at least everybody should identify?
Certainly. Good morning, council members. My name is Arif Ali Khan. I am the director of the Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy for the LAPD, and seated with me is Commander Stuart Maislin, who is the commanding officer of the Internal Affairs Group.
Okay. Again, go. Oh, sorry if I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Thank you. On behalf of Chief Beck, thank you very much for having us here to present the department's position on this very important and consequential proposal. We very much appreciate the independent analysis from the CLA and their report, which we believe provides some very evidence-based and very compelling arguments about the concerns that the chief and the department has about the current proposal that's being presented. And it's not that it involves civilians. The department embraces and has embraced civilian oversight and civilian involvement on the Board of Rights and, of course, on the Board of Police Commissioners for many years. Our concern is that the current proposal is simply to swap out the command officers for civilians, and in that construct will end up in challenges in the chief of police being able to hold officers accountable for serious misconduct. The power of the Board of Rights is very significant, and as was mentioned in the report, and as others have noted, it's very unique to the LAPD. The chief of police of the LAPD does not have the power to terminate an officer who he has found and the department has found has committed serious misconduct without the pre-approval of a Board of Rights. And when a Board of Rights finds the officer either not guilty or guilty but imposes a penalty, even a significant penalty of 65 days, the chief of police has no power to either change that or even appeal that decision within the disciplinary system. And these are cases involving officers involved in illegal conduct, making false statements and integrity violations, racial profiling, and of course excessive force, where the chief of police is limited in the ability to, and if they are acquitted on all the counts, oftentimes the officers have to be returned to the field where they're interacting with the community and the public. The chief is very committed, as I know the city and all of you are, about how important public trust is. And there's nothing more important to maintaining the public's trust than to hold officers accountable for serious misconduct. And I think as the CLA has shown, empirically we have some pretty compelling evidence of the experience with civilian hearing officers over the last 6 years, that in every case in which an officer was acquitted of all counts, the civilian voted for acquittal, even in split verdicts. In every case in which the Board of Rights voted for a penalty less than termination, which is what the chief of police was seeking, the civilian officer voted for leniency. Now, as I mentioned, we don't believe it's simply because it's a civilian. I am the most senior civilian commander in the LAPD. I don't like to look at myself as being overly lenient, and many of them all of them take this job very seriously. I think the problem rises from a few things. First of all, the training that they are exposed to on an ongoing basis about department policies and procedures is very limited. And that's because of the costs associated with doing so, with about 38 hearing officers. Now, they are all very professional, and as I think Mr. Tiefenk, who's here from the commission, would tell you, they are arbitrators, they are professionals. But knowing some of the issues in the LAPD, especially the high standards and the values that the department has with respect to integrity and other things, is difficult. And it's a challenge to understand all the nuances of policing, on the tactics, and which is why oftentimes they look to the sworn command officer for guidance on those things. If civilians, all three civilians, there will be no such ability to do that. In fact, we anticipate the boards would go much longer because you would have to present more and more experts. The other factor is that there is no opportunity for a review of these decisions. Once they are made, they are final. They could be erroneous, or they may have overlooked something, but the chief of police has no option to appeal it to, let's say, the Board of Police Commissioners for review. That is always a healthy process to do that. It enables the Board of Rights members to see maybe they made an error and next time they won't, or it allows the chief to ultimately make sure that he has an opportunity to argue why the decision was wrong and why an officer who he believes has committed serious misconduct should not be retained, and also the impact it has on the organization if the officer is retained, and obviously the public trust. So we believe that this is a worthy discussion, as the Council President mentioned. It is something that needs to be improved. We haven't made any significant changes to this process for 25 years. We should also recognize that no other chief of police in the state of California or sheriff has this system where they have to seek approval. In fact, I was the director of LA Airport Police, and the airport police and the port police are not under the system. They have the civil service system. So when I was there, even as a civilian, I could approve the discharge of an officer, and then they had a right to appeal. But this limitation of a chief, as Chief Bratton has said very publicly, takes discipline out of the hands of the chief of police. And especially in this day and age when police accountability is so critical, To further create a system that takes it even further out of the chief's hands is a concern because we may have to retain an officer. So we look forward to discussing. We do think there are some proposals that could address the issues that are brought up by the CLA and the concerns of the chief. And we look forward to working with the council to potentially do that.
Thank you. Did you want to make a statement? Okay. I refuse to believe that citizen participation is not a good thing. Okay. I don't know why things have been skewed the way that they are. I respect the report. So I do have some questions. I want to know, how do you select the civilians that participate?
Morning, Mr. President,
Morning.
members of the committee. Richard T. Fank, Executive Director of the Board of Police Commissioners. The process for selection of the hearing examiners has been in place for a number of years.
What does that mean, a number?
It goes back to 1992. It goes back to when it was created that there be a civilian hearing examiner.
Gotcha.
Prior to that time, there were civilian hearing examiners, but they participated as the appeal body for police permit review, our review panel. In 1992, when the charter change occurred to make it 2 sworn and 1 civilian, the pool was expanded and the civilians became participatory in the Board of Rights process. So that created a job description. It's put on the commission's website, it's on the city website, and individuals can apply. The vast majority of our hearing examiners are professional mediator, arbitrators, retired administrative law judges, retired judges who are well aware of the administrative law processes and procedures. Some have background in dealing with other bodies within the city family, with the Civil Service Commission. A number are participatory in the County Civil Service Commission as arbitrators, mediators, and also do that for other legislative bodies. So they come to the process understanding the administrative process that we have and how that process works, how the body should look at evidence, how they should also come to a decision-making process. So they'll make application. There's an interview. In the past, we have interviewed those individuals, myself, our Inspector General, our commissioners have been involved in interviews in the past, and ultimately there's a recommendation to the Board of Police Commissioners to appoint or not appoint a member who has applied to the panels. That is done in closed session by the Board of Police Commissioners, since that appointment is considered a personnel matter because they are part-time employees of the city. Since they receive
Gotcha.
4 hours or less, it's $450, more than 4 hours in a day, $900, so they are considered city
So
employees.
how many of these staff do you have, the civilian staff? How many are on the books?
Today there are 38 members in the pool for the Board of Rights.
Okay. How many of them are women?
I'm going to guess about 10 to 15 without having the demographics in front of me at least.
How many of them are minorities? How many of them are blacks and Latinos?
I would say within the population of the African Americans, there are 6. Within the Latino population, about the same, about 6. There are also Asian Pacific Islanders. I believe we have 3 or 4 in that pool.
Now, generally, when you have citizen involvement, it leads to more public accountability and transparency. Would you agree with that statement or not?
I would agree with the accountability. The transparency piece is difficult because in California, in the mid-2000s, a decision was rendered, Copley Press versus the City and County of San Diego. Prior to that decision, our Board of Rights, according to the charter, were open to the public. Upon Copley coming about, those Board of Rights were closed. So currently, under the state of law in California, based on that Supreme Court decision, the boards are closed. So by law, there is a prevention from the transparency or the public being allowed to view those boards or the actual written documents that are presented to the boards.
Okay, how was this selection process set up? Who was it that determined what qualifications civilians would need to have to be on this, be part of this?
The process, as I understand, when the 1992 Charter Amendment occurred, there was a city ordinance that was created that empowered the Board of Police Commissioners to do the mechanism. There was then, at that time, working with the City Personnel Department to identify the qualifications in the job flyer announcement, and then that has become the process that is utilized today.
Okay. All right. Any other things you guys want to say? Any other questions from the members? Nothing at this point? Mr. Weezar? Okay, well, I think what we want to do is we want to move this conversation. And in order to do that, we should direct the city attorney to move forward on putting something together so that we could review. But again, I believe in citizen participation. And I think in this day and age, we need more citizen participation. I believe in the regular guys or gals' ability to be fair. I'm not certain that I understand the qualifications, and I'm not certain that it is as diverse as it could be. I'm not doubting that. And I think going forward, we want to look at a way to empower, given all of the issues that are going on in this country today, I think that we need to find a way for the citizens to have a true voice, for the residents of this city to speak out. And maybe we need to tweak the qualifications. Maybe there needs to be some additional training. Maybe we need to have more of a ordinary individual be able to be qualified to participate, someone that has experience from the neighborhood, somebody that knows what it's like on the streets. And that's one of the reasons why I have embraced this conversation. And because I just believe that there's a need, especially not only in this city, but in this country today. So,
Mr. President, may I just,
please go right ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make clear that the department also fully embraces the idea of expanding citizen participation, and that the expansion of civilians we don't think is we're not against that, and certainly the chief is not against that. What we're concerned about is simply changing them under the current system is not likely to create the level of accountability that the chief certainly hopes for and that the public expects.
I get that.
And there are some changes to the proposal that could enable what you are seeking and what the public is seeking.
And I get that. But sometimes you have to take a step before you can take 5 or 6 steps. Sometimes you have to take a door that's been closed for quite a long time and open it and make some changes. I think that once that occurs, then it's easier to make other changes. Then I think people are more receptive to having a conversation about making all of the necessary changes. So what I want to do is just make sure that this council has a full conversation, that we afford the public the opportunity to participate, that we afford the chief and the leadership, that we afford the rank and file the opportunity to participate as well. I would not want, even though I could understand that people might think that this is being done for one particular group or not. I know for me it is not. It is me. For me, I think there needs to be a change, and sometimes you can't get the whole enchilada with one move. Okay, sometimes it takes a series of moves, and that's just my belief. So, clerk, why don't you read the suggested language, and let's see what the committee's going to do. I can't hear you.
The proposed recommendations, number 1, request the city attorney, with the assistance of the chief legislative analyst, the city administrative officer, and the chair of the Rules, Elections, Intergovernmental Relations, and Neighborhoods Committee, to prepare and transmit the necessary election ordinance and resolutions by Wednesday, January 18th, to place a ballot measure before the voters at the May 16, 2017 general municipal election that would amend City Charter Section 1070 relative to the Police Department's Board of Rights panels to enable the City Council to adopt an ordinance to give officers accused of misconduct the option to have their cases heard by an all-civilian panel selected from a list of hearing examiners maintained by the Board of Police Commissioners that would be in place for a minimum of 3 years and be evaluated for effectiveness at the end of the 3-year period. Recommendation number 2, authorize the city attorney, with the assistance of the chief legislative analyst, the city administrative officer, and the chair of the Rules, Elections, Intergovernmental Relations and Neighborhoods Committee, to make modifications and/or legal corrections to the draft election ordinance, draft resolution, draft ordinance request, and any other related actions listed above in order to further the objectives as described in these recommendations.
Okay, thank you. One thing that was said earlier that makes sense to me, I don't think it's going to take us 3 years to review this policy to see if it's doing the types of things that we would want. I would recommend that we just amend this to be 2 years instead of 3, and request that the members of this committee adopt these recommendations. And I don't know if Mr. Harris Dawson or Mr. Weezer, you want to say anything on that. But this, to me, is not the end, it's the beginning. I want to go out as a committee, as an individual, and have hearings in the community. I want to hear from the folk. I want to hear their recommendations. I know we can't do everything now, but I want to, I want to hear from the community as to what they think works. What can be done so that they can participate more. I want to hear from the rank and file. I want to hear more from the police chiefs. Again, I do believe whenever there's citizen involvement that it's better. And we need to figure out a way to do this where it is, in fact, better. And I don't think we can do that from inside this building, so I plan on having some evening conversations in the community. So again, members, without objection, I would suggest that we adopt these recommendations as amended. Okay, so then without objection, that will be the order. Mr. Clerk, is there anything else that needs to be said or done?
No, sir, that clears the desk.
Okay, then this committee is adjourned. Thank you.